Hey there, welcome everybody. This is Donald Collins from Fool's Gold, Confessions from an Educated Fool. Thank you for, once again, being a subscriber. Whether you're a free subscriber, you're paying me monthly, or you're paying me annually, or you're donating, or you're buying me a coffee. Only a couple of you have bought me a coffee since I've done this, but I'm just experimenting to see how many of you are willing to, I mean, if it's only a couple, almost $4, $8, I appreciate all gifts and donations, right? They're also tax deductible, I guess, at some point, right? Maybe not. I don't think so, right? Because it's you're not donating to me. It's not a go me fund. But maybe I could use that to GoFundMe page or something like that. But anyway, that's another story. I want to talk briefly about the last couple of Substacks I put up specifically about Star Trek. Why Star Trek? Well, for one thing, as I say in the first of the two pieces I've done this week on um, Star Trek, that Star Trek was part of my childhood. It was the reruns of the original series that I got to see pretty much from the time I was like 4 or 5 years old until I literally went off to college the same fall that Star Trek: The Next Generation hit TV screens. That had been that had been the show for Star Trek, and maybe catching a couple of movies through cable or network television in years between say 1982 and 1987, that kind of thing. So that's one of the reasons why I came to mind. But more importantly, the recent efforts to use DEI as a way to resegregate the country, right? I've written an article in Al Jazeera about this that was published in January about for conservatives, DEI might as well stand for don't ever integrate, right? To make the point that this is really their ultimate effort is to take the country back to before Brown v. Board versus education, a country that's segregated and it's legal and majority population's actually fine with segregation. Obviously, the majority population in this day and age isn't really fine with apartheid. That's what it really is, apartheid, right? They're not really fine with that. But they're willing to go along to get along because that's what they did before Jim Crow fell in the 1960s and early 70s, right? So there's that. Um, so that's a part of what I'm thinking about too. But the main thing I'm really thinking about with regard to it is how DEI works and doesn't work at the same time. DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, under which affirmative action could possibly fall or be separate in its own right. And so it was really about creating an atmosphere who, once you bring people who are not the dominant population in a society on board as staff, right? All right, meet people who aren't necessarily able-bodied, meaning people who are not white, meaning people who are not men, meaning people who are not from elite backgrounds, meaning people who are queer in some way, shape, or form, who are gender fluid, who are two-spirited, who are not Christian, who are not, from any major religion. It might be atheist, right? All of those people can be in an environment at an institution, whether it's a college or university, whether it's a nonprofit or NGO, whether it's a government institution or governing body, whether it's corporate America or wherever, and integrate them in a way that makes them welcome. That's not just you tolerating being around these people, just like you tolerate having irritable bowel syndrome, right? That's not really a high bar. But you accept and embrace these people as part of your organization, as part of your campus, as part of the lifeblood of the institutions and structures that run. That's what EDI is supposed to be. And Star Trek is supposed to be this sort of futuristic, idealized version, ultimately, of what DEI stands for, because of it's in its mission to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no one, no person, no human has gone before. That's Starfleet's freaking motto, right? Yet, the key people involved in doing the exploration of strange new worlds, the people who are front and center of those efforts, are the captains of starships who have, among other things, the prime directive that they're supposed to follow when meeting and greeting new civilizations who do not have work-capable technologies. Right, in particular, that's the criteria basically for meeting these folks. And so when I go through all the mainline Star Trek series, all the mainline movies about Star Trek, and all the captains who've been in the captain's chairs through their voice, through being uncredited, being seen on screen for a moment, whether they're on screen for a moment or they're on screen as much as William Shatner and Patrick Stewart have been over the years as captain of ships, right? And when you go through that list and you find out that basically 13 out of the 64 captains have been black, and 4 of them have been mostly in the alternative timeline of Star Trek, where Kirk and Spock still exist. So that's 9 folks, and most of those folks have about much screen time as I'm doing right now to talk to you about it. That's not a lot. That's a couple scenes, 3, 4 scenes out of an episode of Deep Space Nine or an episode of The Next Generation or something along those lines. And so I'm just pointing out the fact that the showrunners, the people who bring in people to say, hey, I want you to play this role for an episode. Hey, let's see if you screen test correctly so we can have you be, the person that's on screen as part of this 1 scene or 2 scenes we're doing in this movie. Or as the person, oh, we like your voice. We want you to do the voice of Captain So-and-so from something or other, right? And so my criteria are simple. I did not count all the different kinds of captains. I didn't count Vulcans. I didn't count Andorians. I didn't count Klingons. I didn't count um, Orions or any other group of supposedly sentient species from this series. And the reason why I didn't do that is simple. Starfleet is an Earth organization that expands to include those species. So the people have to be in mind. People who are in those captain's chairs have had to been folks who either were human or have significant enough screen time for me to count as a Starfleet captain. In the case of, say, Doug Jones's Captain Saru, which he had been captain several times throughout the Discovery series, for example, right? While the species is Kelpian, the person who's wearing the costume is a human being because they're all human beings. And Doug Jones is white, last I checked. So, so there's that. So that's why I did this. I did this really to show that DEI has its limits because in the minds of most people who are operating in these organizations, even as much as they're under the gun to Trump, they're under the gun of their own creation, their own thinking around tolerance and diversity and equity and inclusion. Tolerance does not really help us very much when it's very easy to be intolerant. It means that you've really just crafted DEI into an organization or an institution. You crafted DEI as an idea on the basis of which is, well, white people still must lead. White males still must be the majority of leaders. You can integrate in this organization, but only if you assimilate in such a way that this organization can really accept, because ultimately we are trying to make money. We're trying to satisfy customers or clients. We're trying to satisfy the people who are part of our association, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They don't really care about ultimately you. They only care about you as a worker who's comfortable enough to basically do the job that you were hired to do. They don't care that you're truly comfortable and can fully operate as your full self at the job. They care that you can operate enough. That's tolerance. And that's the way Starfleet, which is presented to us through Star Trek, has presented itself to us without us even really realizing it. And so that's why I'm talking about. Because if you're going to envision a post-Western future, a future that is not dominated by Western thoughts of who should be on top and who should be marginalized and who needs to assimilate in order to go along, in order to get along, then that means that you can't just have white people running everything. You can't have white males being the majority of people who run things, who do all the frontline work in terms of being upfront as leaders, right? You need folks in those leads besides Avery Brooks and Sonequa Martin Green, right? 2 isn't enough. 2 is not enough when you've had a show on for nearly 60 years, a series, a franchise on for 60 years.